I stood there, my heart racing as I watched Karen walk away. Her words echoed in my mind, and my frustration mounted. I had always tried to avoid confrontation in our neighborhood, especially with Karen. It wasn't just about the parking space, it was the attitude, the constant need to control everyone else. But this time, something inside me snapped. She didn't know me, or my daughter, or the challenges we faced every day. I quickly turned to Emily, who was still smiling, excited about our trip to the park. She didn't understand the tension that had just unfolded, and I didn't want her to. I wanted to keep the trip lighthearted, like we always did. But as I looked at her, sitting there in her wheelchair, I couldn't help but feel anger bubbling up. We had enough obstacles in life, from the physical challenges of Emily's condition to the emotional toll it took on all of us. And now Karen was adding another one to the pile. This wasn't just a simple parking dispute. This was her refusing to see us as human beings. "Mom, are we going to the park now?" Emily asked innocently, her voice pulling me back to reality. I smiled, forcing my best calming expression. "Yes, sweetie. We're going. But first, I need to handle something." I turned back to the parking lot, watching as Karen stood off to the side, her eyes narrowing as she glared at my car. It was almost as if she was daring me to defy her. I knew I had to do something before this got out of hand. I grabbed my phone, ready to call my husband, but stopped myself. What was the point? He was already dealing with getting Emily's wheelchair into the car, and I didn't want to drag him into a battle that was unnecessary. No, this was something I could handle on my own. I walked up to Karen, trying to keep my cool. "Karen, I told you, we'll be gone for just a few minutes. My daughter needs this time to get out of the house. It's hard enough for us to get her to a park that's accessible. Please, let us just go." Karen folded her arms, her expression unyielding. "Rules are rules," she said, her voice laced with that familiar tone of superiority. "You're breaking them, and you know it. I'm doing everyone a favor. You shouldn't be parking here." I could feel my blood boiling. The nerve of this woman, thinking she had the right to dictate where and when we could park, especially when Emily was in the car. I took a deep breath and tried to stay composed, but I was losing patience fast. "Karen, this isn't just about parking. My daughter has cerebral palsy. She can't walk, and she relies on this wheelchair. We don't just get to park anywhere. This space was the closest spot, and it helps us get out quicker so we can do things she enjoys. You're not just messing with me, you're messing with my daughter's happiness." Karen didn't flinch. "Well, that's not my problem. You're still in violation, and I'm not going to let it slide." Her response stung, and I could feel my frustration boiling over. "You don't get it, do you, Karen? This isn't just about following some silly rule. This is about real people, real lives. You're sitting here playing HOA police, and you don't even understand the sacrifices we make every day. You don't know what it's like to have a child who struggles with basic tasks. I don't need you adding more stress to our lives because of a parking spot." I took a step closer, my voice steady but filled with frustration. "You don't know what it's like to constantly fight for accommodations, for respect, for the right to live without people like you making everything harder. So, I'm asking you, kindly, to let us go. Let us have this small moment of peace without turning it into a battle." For the first time, Karen seemed to hesitate. Her eyes shifted, just a little. Maybe it was the emotion in my voice, or maybe it was the realization that I wasn't just some mom trying to avoid rules. I was a mother trying to take her daughter out into the world, to give her a moment of joy despite the struggles we faced every single day. She opened her mouth, ready to say something, but before she could, my husband, David, walked up behind me. He had seen the commotion from inside the building, and without saying a word, he placed a hand on my shoulder, giving me the strength to keep going. "Karen," David said in a firm, calm voice. "Enough. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for basic decency. We're leaving, but don't think for a second that this behavior is okay." There was silence for a long moment. I could see the weight of David's words sink in, and for a second, Karen's expression faltered. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but no words came out. Instead, she just nodded curtly, her arms uncrossing as she turned away. David and I made our way to the car, and I could feel Emily's curious eyes on us. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Karen still standing there, watching us leave. There was no victory in that moment, no grand triumph over Karen, but there was a small sense of peace. We had won in a way that mattered, not because of the parking spot, but because we had stood our ground. We had defended our right to live without unnecessary obstacles, without the judgment of someone who couldn't see past her own narrow worldview. As we drove toward the park, Emily was already chatting excitedly about the swings, completely unaware of the battle that had just unfolded. And that, I realized, was the best part of it all. She didn't have to worry about the small, petty things that sometimes get in the way of life. She was free to just be a kid. And I would fight every day to make sure she stayed that way. I could feel my hands shaking as I stood there, watching the tow truck driver methodically attach the hooks to my car. The sound of metal scraping against the ground made my stomach churn. The last thing I wanted was to make a scene, but it felt like my entire world was crumbling around me. "Stop! You don't understand," I shouted again, my voice a mix of desperation and frustration. Emily, still sitting in her wheelchair, looked up at me with wide eyes, her confusion growing by the second. I could see the worry starting to creep into her face, and it made my blood run cold. She was already facing so many challenges in life. Why did we have to deal with this too? I tried to calm myself down. I needed to be strong for her. But the way the tow truck driver didn't even acknowledge my plea, the way Karen was standing there, arms crossed, watching like some sort of twisted spectator, it was too much. "Please, just give us a moment," I begged, my voice wavering. "My daughter is disabled. She can't move without help. We just need a minute to get out of here." But the driver's face remained impassive. He glanced at Karen, who was now standing smugly by her front door, arms crossed like she had won some kind of victory. She looked pleased with herself. She had the power to make everything harder for us, and it was clear she was savoring it. "Sorry, ma'am. I've been instructed to tow," he replied flatly, his eyes not meeting mine as he continued his work. It was as if I was speaking to a brick wall. I looked at Emily again, who now had tears welling up in her eyes. The last thing I wanted was for her to feel the weight of this situation, but I couldn't shield her from everything. She was already so used to facing obstacles every day. Why was Karen adding more to her plate? The worst part was that I felt utterly powerless. My mind raced, trying to think of a way out of this. Couldn't the driver see that I was trying to do what was best for my daughter? Didn't he understand that this wasn't just a parking dispute? It wasn't about following some arbitrary rule. It was about me trying to take care of my child. I turned to Karen, who was now walking toward me with a slow, deliberate pace. She looked at me with that all-too-familiar sneer, as if she were daring me to challenge her. "I told you, rules are rules," she said, her voice cold and unfeeling. "You should have parked properly." My frustration boiled over. "You have no idea what it's like," I shouted, my voice breaking. "You don't know what it's like to fight every single day just to have a little peace, just to do something as simple as take your daughter to the park. And you," I pointed toward her, barely able to keep the anger in check. "You think you're right because you're enforcing some ridiculous rule without even thinking for 1 second about the impact it has on us." Karen's face didn't change. She didn't even seem to care. Her eyes narrowed, and she just shrugged her shoulders. "I'm just doing my job. I'm not here to make exceptions for anyone." I could feel the tears stinging my eyes, but I couldn't let them fall. I couldn't show weakness in front of Emily. Not now. I turned back to the tow driver, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "You can't just do this. I need you to stop." But he wasn't budging. The chains were already in place, and the car was slowly being lifted off the ground. My heart pounded in my chest, and my entire body was filled with a sense of helplessness that I had never felt before. I looked at Emily, her small hands gripping the wheels of her chair, her eyes now filled with confusion and anxiety. This wasn't the outing we had planned. This wasn't what I had promised her. How could someone like Karen, someone who didn't even know us, cause so much harm? I pulled out my phone, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I didn't want to escalate this further, but I had no other choice. I dialed the police. "Yes, I need help," I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I tried to steady myself. "My car is being towed unfairly. My daughter is disabled, and we were parked there for just a few minutes. The tow driver is refusing to let us move it, and there's a woman who is harassing us." The dispatcher on the other end of the line promised to send an officer right away, but even as I hung up, I knew the damage had already been done. My stomach churned with a feeling of dread as I looked at the tow truck, which was now halfway done with the process. Emily looked at me with wide, unsure eyes, and I could see the fear starting to take over. She knew something wasn't right. I turned to Karen once more, feeling a lump form in my throat. "You've made your point, Karen. Can't you just let us go? Can't you just be human for once?" But Karen didn't flinch. Instead, she gave me a cold, emotionless stare and walked back to her front door. It was clear she had won, and for her, that was enough. The tow truck driver finally stopped, and I stood there, waiting for the authorities to arrive. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about parking anymore. It was about standing up to someone who had no idea what it meant to care for others, to show empathy, to understand what real struggles looked like. I just hoped that by the time the police arrived, it wasn't too late to undo the damage that had been done. The minutes dragged on.